Hey, real quick, if it wasn't obvious, this video is a part 2 to a previous video of mine. It's the top link in the description, and if you haven't already, I urge you to go and watch that video before this one, as I go over some of the hardest hitters for Death Knight, like the bat and the left-handedness. Anyways, onto the intro. Assuming you did as I just asked, you've probably watched my last video and know how this whole thing works. Other than an intro, I'm gonna be upfront and talk about 2 theories I will not be going over in this video, and why. For one, I'm not going over the Mother 3 connections. I haven't played Mother 3, and I unfortunately don't plan to anytime soon. I know your missing brother turns out to be the big bad or something, and I know Toby has said something about Deltarune being similar to Mother 3, but I just can't be fucking bothered. Actually, hold on, side tangent real quick. When the hell did Toby say this? Death Sniders will always be talking about, oh, Toby said he was worried about Deltarune. He was worried Deltarune took too much inspiration from Mother 3. When? Where? I looked everywhere, from his Twitter to his Blue Sky to Deltarune.com to interviews with the man, and I genuinely could not find when he said this. Can someone please direct me to when he said this? Like, I'm not doubting you, I just feel like I'm going crazy. As I was saying, since I haven't played the game and my knowledge of it is surface level at best, I'll inevitably get something wrong and have some YouTube comment essayist talking about some, actually that's an inaccurate fan translation or something, and then I'll just want to off myself. Plus, to me at least, this kind of feels like a Skies Forever Blue situation all over again, where people were pointing at the pink boat girl and calling Des, does it not? Like, it's its own separate piece of media. Can we just accept that, please? Secondly, I will not be addressing the Des, Amalgam, Titan, Gaster, whatever theory, for 2 reasons. One, if it wasn't obvious, there's just too many different flavors of the theory, and it would be an absolute headache to try and cover them all. Alongside this, point 2, it's extremely speculatory. And you see, the issue with debunking speculation is that, well, you can't. Let me put this into perspective. If I said, yeah, I think Gaster himself at the end of Deltarune just goes trigger deep on a Glock and lets his fingers slip, I think WD Gaster will blow his f***ing brains. Okay, you get the point. But you see, the issue is that you can't exactly prove it wrong, because there's neither proof for the theory nor against it. So I'm sorry to the actual mountain of comments I received on my last video saying something along these lines. Anyways, today I will be going over 10 Death Knight theories, with 2 of them being rebuttals. Also, since a handful of these are on the more speculative side, my debunks may not be as debunk-like. If that doesn't make much sense, just, you'll see, trust me. Now with all that out of the way, first, let's start with some rebuttal to counterpoints I received on my last video. This was probably the most controversial point in my last video. To recap, I argued that the weapon the knight uses can't be a bat. In the light world. Listen, I get that it wasn't super clear in my last video, but I thought mentioning Carol's katana, since that's also a suspect for the knight's weapon in the light world, and specifically saying the knight's weapon has to be a knife in the light world would make it pretty obviously implied, but I guess I have to spell it out. I am not saying this visually doesn't look like a bat. I even said that I thought this looked like a bat too, but I still got so many people in the comment section talking about, oh, it can still be a bat because Chris's sword can transform into a shield and therefore the knight's bat can transform into a sword, blah, 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 blah. I never said the weapon doesn't look like a bat in the dark world. I was just saying that, actually speaking, because of the prophecy, this weapon has to be the blackened knife in the light world. Listen. Will some Death Knight deniers look you in the eye and say, nah, that doesn't look like a bat? Yes. Will I? No. With that being said, I'm going to regurgitate 2 arguments I've seen to try and explain why this sprite looks like this, in a way that isn't pro-Death Knight. First of all, I've seen some Carol Knighters argue that this isn't the rounded end of a bat, but rather the rounded end of a sheath for a sword. Alternatively, and this is definitely speculation, I've seen both Rudy Knighters and Carol Knighters, hell, even Astro Knighters could argue this, say that maybe their weapon manifests as a bat-looking object at first because that's the knight's desire? Like, it manifests as a bat because that's Des' signature thing, and whoever the knight would be in this situation would be quite literally manifesting finding Des, if that makes sense? This argument has far too many layers than what's explainable in a short amount of time, so I'm just gonna move on. Move on as in provide more evidence as to why this has to be the blackened knife in the light world, because there were still people doubting, so feast your eyes on this! Considering this is the description of the black shard in the dark world and it still calls the knight's weapon a black knife, I'm pretty sure it's not a bat. And this time, I'm actually saying this in terms of the light and dark world. Don't get my argument twisted though. For like the 3rd time, I'm not saying this doesn't look like a bat. I'm just saying it cannot physically be a bat in the light world. And most of the time, it isn't a bat in the dark world. Because of the whole Chris sword transforming into a shield argument Death Knighters love to make, I wouldn't completely write off the knight's weapon being a bat in this moment. But again, it could very well be a sheath. And to be honest, I'll just say that. Anyways, that was a whole lot of yapping. Time for the second and final rebuttal. So again, to quickly summarize, in my last video I had just a point I'd seen some Death Knighters use, that being that the knight has snowflake attacks and snowflakes equals death because holiday theme. I had 2 debunks for this one, but I'd like to specifically focus on the first point I made, which was just pointing out how since these snowflakes get their damage reduced by the Shadow Mantle, it would mean they're actually stars, because the Shadow Mantle reduces damage from dark and star attacks. And knowing this, a few Death Knighters argued that, well, yeah, sure, they're stars, and you know who has a connection to stars? Des, because she has glow-in-the-dark stars in her room. Are you shitting me? Listen, I could kind of buy this if, say, for example, the stars in Des's room had interactable dialogue, or like if Noelle talked about Des loving stars, or even if they were just like all over her room. But no, these stars hold about as much significance as the violin or trumpet in Des's room. Guys, I have the choker with the star charm on it, which you know can only mean one thing. I'm the knight? Okay, I think you get my point. To go over some of the new theories, some of them even in the comment section of my last video. Ready? Yep, you read that right. Some people unironically draw a connection between this dialogue from interacting with Des's bat and this flavor text in the Knight's fight. And listen, again, I could maybe kind of buy this if they used like the same word, but they don't! They use synonyms! Like, what's next? This save point in chapter 3 is the knight because it says knight and that's a homophone? Like, God forbid Dobby used 2 words with similar meaning twice, huh? Looking past this traumatic example, these are genuinely astronomical levels of reaching. You know what? While I'm here, speaking of reaching, okay, to be fair, I've only seen a handful of people use this argument, but the fact people are even using this as an argument at all is, let's just say those who unironically use this argument need to be aptly punished. Methods of torture and execution. That aside, what the fuck is this argument? Like, genuinely. As previously established, arguing that something does or doesn't look like something is already practically useless because the other person can just be like, yeah, you can see it that way, I guess, and no one wins. This is sort of what I was getting at with my Death Knight bat debunk, because at this point, there's nothing I can really do to debunk this argument. We can bicker all we want, but there's not enough evidence to prove either of us right. But the difference with this point is that, okay, I'll admit, most people, again, myself included, saw and still see a bat with the spread of the night. However, with this sprite, I think most reasonable people just see a tough-ass aura-farming and mysterious orb. Not a godforsaken baseball. Hell, it barely looks like a baseball. Like, if it was striped, yeah, maybe, but this just looks like slowly sloshing liquid, does it not? No, because genuinely, when I first saw this argument, I played Deltarune the next day, and I saw the sprite of the annoying dog, and I actually started yelling and pointing at my screen while babbling nonsense about it being the roaring night. So while people who think this is a baseball can still technically stand by their point, it should be known that this isn't the reasonable conclusion to draw to. If you can look me in the eyes and say this is a baseball, I can look you in the eyes and say this is Carol. Even with the downright egregious points I've gone over so far, which by the way, we'll get to better, more valid ones here soon, just let me see, please. This might be my #1 most loathed argument in favor of Death Knight. Genuinely convinced this argument is what inspired this image. Seriously though, I think this argument should be taught in college-level communications classes, because you see, in said classes there's a unit about logical fallacies, and this argument could perfectly embody. I'm talking case study, confirmation bias. You know, the tendency for us humans to believe in a certain idea and then look at something and convince ourselves, wait, this low-key proves what I was thinking, when in reality, there's nothing. It's obviously not a good thing in arguments that are actually trying to, well, argue and not just speculate and schizopost. Anyways, before my next point, I'd like to show off a video I made in mid-July to express my rage and disdain for this theory. Enjoy. Cause listen, I hate this argument so much because you could literally just as easily say, guys, look, the knight is dabbing. That means that the knight is an MLG pro gamer. You know who the only MLG pro gamer is? So yeah, that's that. Moving on. So for those who are unaware, if you backtrack after seeing the final prophecy and interact with the now closed wall, you'll get some dialogue about reaching out as a hand meets your own. Nothing special, yeah? Probably just Chris and Night shenanigans, right? But in the code of the game, a sound plays after you close the dialogue. However, the sound's volume is set to 0, and the sound in question is, well, a guitar sound. And since, as previously mentioned, this is implied to be the night, some people use this as fuel for Death's Night. Now, I have a couple of ways to debunk this, so I'll just start with the obvious. The sound is muted. It literally doesn't play in game. Now, while I haven't seen this used, I will throw you disbelievers a bone. I can see the counter argument being made that, oh, well, the white cloak in the mantle board is a deer before loading in, and that's obviously left in the code as an Easter egg, therefore, it's the same thing here. And honestly, fair enough, I'll let that slide. But if we're gonna talk about things left in the code, you gotta address the elephant in the room. This fucking Carol spray. I'm sorry, but I have yet to see an actually convincing argument against this sus-ass spray. I know this is less of a debunk and more like flipping this argument on its head, but still, while we're talking about sounds, bonus debunk! While putting off working on this video, I stumbled upon a short that found if you slow down one of the sounds the Knight makes while charging, it sounds like a talk sound. And, of course, people are connecting this to Des and saying, yeah, this is Des's talk sound. Bruh. For one, and the girl in the video even mentions this herself, does this not sound more like Azrael's God of Hyperdeath talk sound? Like, for how diverse talk sounds usually are, this feels eerily similar. I'm not saying Azrael's the Knight, though some people might. Just thought I'd point that out, you know? Secondly, and more importantly, what's stopping this from just being the Knight's talking sound? The Knight hasn't spoken yet, and they're most definitely going to have a unique talk sound. This could just be foreshadowing for that. Again, this just feels like confirmation bias. Speaking of bias, I think it's about time we address some of the allegations against Carol Knight. Just like last video, I'm going over these because I see a lot of Desnetters use them when defending their theories, so... Okay, I know I said I'll get to the actually interesting theories soon, but this argument was used a surprising amount under my last video, and like, why? The counter-argument is pretty obvious. Des wouldn't be able to carry a writhing Undyne either. So again, I ask why. Well, I know why, actually. So let me give this theory its due diligence. From what I saw, most people are using this as part of their Des Amalgam Knight theory. And the reason Des would be able to handle Undyne and Carol wouldn't is because Des would have, like, amalgam powers or something. But you see, the thing about this argument is that it's very obviously far too broad. If you actually try and think of unmodified characters in Hometown that could physically overpower Undyne, the only real possibility is, like, Asgore. Which, to be fair, I have seen the theory that maybe he and the Knight did a sort of tag team maneuver, so when the Knight brought Undyne to the light world, they just handed her off to Asgore. Alternatively, it's not too difficult to assume that Undyne is just unconscious, and that's why the Knight, whether they're Carol, Des, or whoever, is able to carry Undyne, because while Undyne is strong, she's not physically large. She's built like a twink, so it wouldn't be unreasonable for an adrenaline-ridden Knight to carry an unconscious Undyne across Hometown. Note that this evidence is under the assumption that the suspicious color is the Knight and not a cohort of them. Carol working for Des, like under Des, is a whole different argument that I'm just not going to be going over in this video. Anyways, this is a hard hitter. You see, some people believe that because of the difference between the call at the end of the Snowgrave route and the normal route, it implies these are two different people, which, really? I mean, and I feel like I've said this 100 times already, it can be interpreted that way, I guess. Personally though, I saw this as confirmation that the suspicious color is Carol, because, you know, they're calling at the exact same time, with the exact same vague and ominous tone. Besides, you can't just present this considerably weak evidence and say, well damn, I guess Carol isn't the suspicious color now, and then there's like a pile of unaddressed evidence in the background. If you're gonna try and flip the evidence against Carol being the suspicious color on its head, you gotta find a way to either flip or debunk all of this as well, which, again, I've yet to see anyone convincingly do so. This is another point used by Des Amalgam Knighters, so I'm kinda just dancing around the theory, I guess. In any case, this point is kinda stupid, not gonna lie. The Knight is very obviously meant to be wearing a set of armor. I mean, it's literally in the name. Knights are kinda known for wearing armor. If that's not enough, we also know for certain that because of the semi-hidden Think of the Knight dialogue option in chapter 4, the Knight's head getup is a helmet. Since we're pulling from Chris's memory of the Knight, and they clearly know more about them than we do, we can be pretty confident this information is correct, especially since they begin panicking and thinking of anything but the Knight. So we know the Knight's head is comprised of armor. I actually recall giving this argument to someone who brought this theory up, and I swear to God, they said something like, yeah, only the helmet, not the rest of the body. I'm sorry? Is the knight running some Dark Souls speedrunner build? Like, what? Do you seriously think this is the knight's bare body and it just somehow matches their helmet? The knight is clearly wearing some tough-ass armor that somehow snatches their waist beyond belief. And now, it's time for the final theory. This one's a tad complicated, but it's a pretty hard hitter, so strap in. Shenanigans is admittedly a pretty vague word, so let me explain what this theory is before trying to debunk it. So basically this theory says, well, if Carol were the knight, why would Gerson appear in the Chapter 4 Dark Worlds made by the knight? Carol doesn't have an obvious connection to Gerson, so him appearing in the Dark Worlds if Carol were the knight wouldn't make much sense. Right off the bat, pun unintended, I don't like that this theory goes off the basis that Lightners reincarnated by the Dark World can only appear if the person making the Dark Fountain had a close emotional connection to the deceased individual. Yes, it is kind of implied by Ralsei when Susie is tweaking out over Gerson not being in her Dark World, but there's a different answer here. And I actually like this idea so much, I'm gonna give it a name. The distortion theory. Gerson may not appear in Susie's Dark World because the only Gerson Susie knew was a version of Gerson already slightly distorted by the lens of darkness. In other words, perhaps this Gerson fight in the second Chapter 4 Dark World is actually kind of Gerson. I'm aware Ralsei says it's a statue from Gerson's study that just started moving, but they never do that before or after this encounter, so there's clearly something more mysterious going on here. Think of it like this. Since the only Gerson Susie knew was a Dark World Gerson, trying to view an already darkened version of Gerson under further darkness distorted him beyond recognition. If you consider how Dark Worlds themselves actually work, it makes a lot of sense. Under a single layer of darkness, light worlds become fantastical, idealized, yet warped versions of reality. But if you were to stack this darkness and open a dark fountain within a dark world, the darkness distorts and takes the form of a horrifying eldritch titan. It's the same thing here. Under a single layer of darkness, Gerson becomes a fantastical, idealized version of himself, but if he's put under another layer of it, he becomes a horrifying eldritch beast. Therefore, I don't think reincarnated Lightners appearing in Dark Worlds is based on the relationship the Fountain Opener has with the deceased individual, but rather if they have met this person in the Light World, which Carol, being Dessa's mother, definitely would have if we assume Des was a student of Gerson. While this doesn't debunk Des possibly being the knight, it also keeps Carol as a candidate, which is all I wanted from this section of the video. Speaking of this video, let's wrap this up already. I don't think my closing thoughts in my last video were very good or well worded, so I'd like to fix that in this video. I want it to be known that a lot of my hate for Des Knight is played up for the camera. I don't hate the idea of Des being the knight, I just personally find it unrealistic. What I do have at least somewhat of a disdain towards is those who believe in Des Knight stretching and squeezing every last drop of evidence they can get out of this game to try and prove their point. That is the reason I make these videos. It's to metaphorically slap some sense into these kinds of people. And I want to be treated the same. If some of the stuff I said in this video, or past videos, was stupid, I'd want people to reach through their screens and slap some sense into me. That aside, what I really want you to get out of this video, if anything, is that none of this bickering really matters. Toby already likely knows who the knight is, and I trust he also has a very good explanation as to why they would be the knight. So, whoever the knight turns out to be, I want us all to be open-minded about it. If you strongly believe a certain character isn't the knight, remember to be a denier, not a hater. Don't let yourself or others take away from your future experience with this game. With all that being said, there's only one more thing for me to say. The knight isn't their own goddamn character! Stop saying that!